Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever seen a candle stay lit in the middle of a violent storm? Have you ever witnessed silence so powerful that it screams louder than 1,000 voices? This is the power of the super empath. There is no battle more profound than the one that occurs without words. There is no revenge more complete than the one rooted in self-mastery. And there is no torment more piercing for the narcissist than facing someone they cannot control. Let us begin. Silence, when wielded with awareness, becomes a force greater than any argument or emotional outburst. For the super empath, silence is not a lack of response, it is an intentional stand, a choice rooted in self-mastery. In the presence of a narcissist who is constantly fishing for emotional chaos, validation or reaction, silence becomes unbearable. It starves them, it exposes their emptiness. A narcissist relies on provocation. They provoke to observe, to manipulate, and to feel significant. They need your anger, your confusion, your desperation. But when met with stillness, their tactics collapse. The empath, by remaining silent, creates a mirror so clean, so unmoved, that the narcissist has no choice but to face themselves without distraction. This silence is not weakness. It is the sound of inner strength. It is the refusal to give power to manipulation. A narcissist often twists words, redefines reality, and shifts blame with mastery. But what can be twisted when there are no words? What can be blamed when nothing is said? In silence, the empath does not engage in battle. They do not seek to win a war of ego. Instead, they retreat into their power, and from that sacred space, they disarm the narcissist entirely. The empath understands that not all battles require a sword, some are best won with an empty hand and a composed mind. Silence allows space for truth to surface. When the empath refuses to react, they no longer contribute to the illusion. They create discomfort, not by force, but by clarity. In that space, the narcissist's carefully constructed image begins to unravel. The manipulation no longer lends. The guilt trips lose their effect. The emotional traps go untriggered. And in that stillness, the narcissist realizes they have lost their grip. The one thing they cannot stand is becoming invisible in front of someone they once controlled. Silence, then, becomes a sharp light that reveals what they are desperately trying to hide. Insecurity, fear, dependency, and the fragile ego they pretend doesn't exist. The super empath, through silence, cultivates observation instead of reaction. They conserve energy, preserve dignity, and allow the narcissist to reveal more of their true nature without interference. This clarity is not only protection, it is transformation. It builds emotional muscle. It proves to the empath that they are no longer reactive, no longer controlled by external games. Every time they choose silence over confrontation, presence over panic, they reclaim their authority. And the narcissist, faced with this evolution, is left powerless. The absence of a reaction becomes louder than any scream. It echoes in the narcissist's mind, haunting them with a reality they cannot control, twist, or define. The empath becomes untouchable, not because they fought harder, but because they rose above the need to fight at all. Indifference, to a narcissist, is not just silence. It is annihilation. It is a complete withdrawal of energy, attention, and emotional supply, which to them is lifeblood. Unlike hatred or anger, which still offer the narcissist a sense of importance, indifference communicates one powerful truth. They no longer matter. And for someone whose identity is constructed around being admired, feared, envied, or needed, this is unbearable. The super empath, by embodying indifference, does not just walk away. They energetically vanish. There is no lingering pain to feed off, no bitterness to manipulate, no affection to reattach to. The empath becomes untouchable, not through aggression, but through detachment. And this detachment is what tortures the narcissist most. A narcissist is addicted to control. They thrive on knowing they can still push your buttons, ignite your emotions, and insert themselves into your mental space, But when they are met with indifference, those buttons don't work anymore. Thus, irrelevance. The empath, by practicing detachment, not only removes themselves from the game, but also exposes how little the narcissist truly has to offer when there is no reaction to harvest. The mask starts to slip, and underneath it, they are faced with a terrifying void. They are not needed, not feared, not admired. The mind, they are ignored. Indifference is more than walking away. It is not checking their messages, not wondering what they are doing, not responding when they test the waters. It is the internal decision that their presence, their words, their existence no longer deserve space in your emotional universe. This absence to a narcissist is like a room with no mirrors, nothing to reflect their imagined greatness, and without reflection they cease to exist in the only way they know how. The empath, through indifference, dissolves the narcissist's perceived importance, not by confrontation, but by elevation. They rise, and in that rising, they disappear from the narcissist's grip. What makes indifference so potent is that it requires inner work. It is not passive neglect. It is conscious detachment born of healing. It is knowing that reacting keeps the loop alive while non-reaction ends it. It is the quiet declaration that says, I am no longer available to be hurt by you. And this declaration without words is heard louder than any argument. The narcissist, unable to provoke, finds themselves spiraling. Their ego bruises not from insults but from absence. Their control fails not because someone resisted, but because someone stopped playing. In the end, the most excruciating truth for the narcissist is that they no longer hold value in your eyes. No anger, no sadness, just neutrality. They are no longer the center of attention. They are no longer a source of power. They become what they fear most, unimportant. And that quiet dismissal, that invisible departure, is a wound their ego cannot heal. Healing is not loud. It does not announce itself with noise or spectacle. But in the aftermath of emotional manipulation, betrayal, or psychological abuse, healing becomes the most profound and devastating response. To a narcissist who builds their identity around control, superiority, and emotional dominance, nothing is more frustrating than watching the person they once broke rise again, calmer, stronger, and untouchable. When a super empath heals, they do not simply recover what was lost. They transform the pain into wisdom, the confusion into clarity, and the broken pieces into an even more powerful whole. That evolution is the kind of revenge that requires no aggression, because it operates at a level far beyond the narcissist's reach. A narcissist expects devastation. They expect their target to be ruined, to dwell in sorrow, to come crawling back. That is the fuel they crave. But healing removes the empath from this cycle. It breaks the pattern. And in doing so, it sends a message far more piercing than retaliation ever could. You no longer matter in my story. This is unbearable for someone whose sense of worth is built on being needed, feared, or missed. The narcissist may try to re-enter, to provoke once more, to remind the empath of the past. But healing shuts the door with grace. It is the refusal to relive what once caused suffering, so that the missed door reveals for him indefinite health, hope. It is a peaceful, empowered silence that says, I've outgrown you. True healing involves reclaiming one's identity. The empath no longer seeks validation from the outside. They no longer wonder why it happened, or what they did wrong. They stop trying to fix the narcissist. Instead, they focus on themselves. They nurture their mind, strengthen their spirit, and set boundaries without guilt. This self-investment is what infuriates the narcissist most, because it proves they were never the source of the empath's worth. Every step forward in healing chips away at the narcissist's illusion of power, and eventually, the illusion collapses. There is no satisfaction for the narcissist in seeing someone become whole. They are most satisfied when others remain fractured and dependent. but healing starves them. It denies them the emotional chaos they thrive on, and the more the empath glows with self-love, peace, and direction, the more invisible the narcissist becomes. They watch from the shadows as the person they once controlled walks forward unbothered, unaffected, and unreachable. This is not revenge born of spite. It is revenge born of growth. It is not fueled by bitterness. It is fueled by freedom. Healing is the declaration that the past no longer dictates the future. It is the quiet revenge that shows itself not in destruction, but in resurrection. It turns every wound into a badge of resilience. And for the narcissist, who thought they could define the empath's worth forever, this becomes the harshest truth of all. Their power was temporary. Their influence was shallow. But the empath's healing, it is eternal. Self-mastery is not about control over others. It is about sovereignty over oneself. It is the quiet command over thoughts, emotions, and actions that no one sees but everyone feels. In the presence of chaos, self-mastery allows the empath to remain grounded, like a mountain in a storm. While others are thrown off course by insults, manipulation, or emotional games, the one who has mastered themselves does not react. They respond. That difference is subtle, but it is the birthplace of real power. The narcissist, who thrives on emotional disruption, loses all advantage in front of someone who cannot be moved from their center. Self-mastery creates a wall that is not built from aggression or defense, but from calm, conscious presence. When the empath develops self-mastery, they no longer serve as a mirror for the narcissist's dysfunction. They stop trying to explain, to fix, or to be understood. Instead, they embody discipline, clarity, and detachment. This is infuriating to the narcissist because it renders all their tactics useless. Gaslighting fails when the empath knows their own truth. Guilt trips collapse when the empath no longer doubts their choices. Projection bounces off like wind against a stone when the empath has already faced and healed their inner wounds. The narcissist finds themselves trying to fight someone who has no weapons. Because the true warrior has disarmed themselves internally, there is nothing to exploit when the empath is no longer triggered. Self-mastery is not born from ease. It is forged through pain, reflection, and discipline. It requires looking within, taking accountability, and making the hard decision to grow instead of blame. That growth doesn't just liberate the empath. It makes them unshakable. And when the narcissist sees this, they are met with the one thing they cannot understand: someone who doesn't need them, fear them, or hate them. It is the empath's shield, not one made of ego, but of awareness. This kind of power is not loud, it is not aggressive, it doesn't demand attention. But its presence is undeniable. It influences the environment without trying. It teaches through example, not instruction. The empath, having cultivated themselves in silence, walks with a presence that speaks louder than defense ever could. Self-confidence. Living in the presence to a world attempting to move beyond the small known values of poverty, control, inequality, disfavor, making them seem smaller than defense ever could. Self-confidence. Living in the presence to a world that inscrutable, conflicts, and unpredictable. Self-confidence. Living in the presence without defense ever could. Self-confidence. Living in the presence with the narcissist senses this, even if they cannot name it. They feel it as discomfort, as loss of control, as the end of the game. Self-mastery rewrites the script. It transforms the empath from a participant in the narcissist's drama into a silent observer, unaffected and uninvolved. That shift is more than empowerment. It is liberation. And it is the only power that cannot be manipulated, taken, or broken, because it comes from within. Presence is not just physical. It is a conscious state of being that radiates clarity, awareness, and calm energy. It is the power of being fully in the moment, fully within yourself, and fully aware of what is happening around you, without being pulled by it. When a super empath develops presence, they become immune to the invisible strings a narcissist tries to pull. Manipulation, by nature, works in subtlety. It sneaks in through distraction, confusion, and emotional entanglement. But presence acts as a light that reveals all shadows. It brings the unconscious to the surface, and with it, the games begin to fall apart. A narcissist depends on psychological fog. They thrive when the other person is doubting, emotional, or reactive. Manipulation cannot survive in the light of awareness. It needs someone to be unaware, to be unsure, to second-guess themselves. But when the empath trains themselves to remain fully present, they begin to see patterns. They start to recognize the emotional hooks before they sink in. The tone, the words, the timing, all of it becomes visible. And when it is visible, it loses its power. Presence gives birth to perception, and perception gives birth to choice. The empath is no longer a puppet, responding to emotional bait. They are an observer, choosing not to play. To be present is to be still on the inside. It means not rushing to react, not trying to defend or explain, and not getting caught in the storm of someone else's dysfunction. This kind of stillness is not passive, it is powerful. It allows the empath to hold their ground while seeing everything for what it is. Spoken agreements that keep toxic dynamics alive. It says, without words, I see you, and I will not be moved. There is an energetic shift when someone is truly present. They are harder to fool, harder to sway, and impossible to control. Their energy is rooted, not scattered. Their focus is sharp, not diluted. This quiet confidence disarms the narcissist, who relies on others being emotionally vulnerable and unaware. The empath's presence is like a mirror that reflects all projections back to the sender. It becomes a shield that does not block through force, but through awareness. The narcissist cannot manipulate someone who sees them clearly, without fear and without need. Presence also empowers the empath to speak only when necessary, to withdraw when appropriate, and to walk away when the situation is no longer aligned with truth. It brings clarity to decisions and prevents entanglement in emotional traps. Manipulation becomes obvious, almost childish, in the light of conscious presence. The empath no longer asks, why are they doing this, but instead says, I see what this is, and I choose not to engage. This subtle but powerful shift marks the end of control. The narcissist, expecting confusion, receives stillness. Expecting reaction, they find neutrality. And expecting to dominate, they find themselves exposed and ineffective in front of someone who has become fully awake. Transcendence is not escape, nor is it retaliation. It is the quiet rising above everything that once held you captive. For the super empath, transcendence marks the end of the emotional tug-of-war with the narcissist. It is the realization that healing is not about proving a point, changing the other person, or being understood. So, in a vacuum, while the deep corners cracked, nothing. It is about outgrowing the entire dynamic. Transcendence is when you no longer need closure because peace has been created within. The narcissist thrives in cycles. Cycles of hurt, apology, manipulation, blame, and control. But when the empath transcends, they step out of the cycle entirely, rendering it powerless and incomplete. A narcissist expects the game to continue. They are used to provoking a response, reigniting conflict, and pulling the empath back into old roles. Transcendence ends this possibility. The empath, now awake and whole, no longer relates to the narrative of victim and villain. They stop arguing, stop defending, stop explaining. They no longer seek to win because they understand there was never anything worth winning. Their focus shifts entirely inward. This shift dismantles the narcissist's influence. Without the empath participation, the cycle dies of neglect. The narcissist becomes irrelevant, not because of punishment, but because of progress. Transcendence is born from deep internal work. It requires detachment, not from emotion, but from identity tied to suffering. The empath no longer sees themselves as someone broken or needing rescue. They become the observer, the witness of their journey, the architect of their future. This higher state of awareness makes manipulation impossible because it brings every unconscious pattern into the light. Transcendence does not harden the empath. It softens them toward truth and strengthens them toward boundaries. It teaches them to protect their energy not with walls, but with clarity. When the empath transcends, they forgive, not to free the narcissist, but to free themselves. They release anger, not because the narcissist deserves peace, but because they do. Transcendence is the severing of invisible cords, the emotional dependency, the hope for change, the cycles of attachment. It is the recognition that some people are lessons, not destinations. The narcissist, unable to evolve with the empath, is left behind. And that abandonment is not cruel, it is sacred. The empath does not leave with bitterness, but with wisdom. They carry no vengeance, only insight. This kind of freedom is something the narcissist can never understand. They exist in control, chaos, and reaction. The idea of someone becoming completely unbound by their influence is intolerable. And yet, transcendence ensures exactly that. The empath's growth becomes a path the narcissist cannot follow, not because they are blocked from it, but because they refuse to walk it. The empath transcends by choosing themselves completely, by honoring their peace, by walking away with grace. The game ends not when the narcissist loses, but when the empath no longer plays. And in that final silence, filled with presence and awareness, the old story dissolves and a new life begins. Free, unshaken, and whole.